Hi, this is Anthony with uni-edit, and today I will help you avoid bad PowerPoint presentation slides for your conference presentation. As always, please click like and subscribe below to help this video so that we may bring you more free content in the future. We appreciate your support. This presentation today uses and focuses on Microsoft PowerPoint, and we'll be looking at these key points. So let's start thinking about our design. Remember, you are giving an academic presentation, and it needs to be professional and businesslike. Try to use more simple designs, as they are not distracting and they will help your content remain clear. There are many patterns that you can choose to use, but really think about how does your design reflect the presentation. Let's say you want to use the water droplets, but if your presentation has nothing to do with water, they might seem out of place. Generally, universities can provide you with a design, or you may ask them to use their logo. That's a really great starting point. Moving into fonts, we can see how different fonts can convey different information. Title fonts are great at 44 to 36 points. Main point fonts can be at 28 points. It is most important that everybody in the room can read all of the words on your slides. So think carefully. Some bad fonts would be fonts that are too small, like mentioned before, capitalized fonts, which are very difficult for many international students, and complicated fonts or crazy fonts or handwriting fonts. These are typically not considered to be professional. When in doubt, just use the prescribed format of your university. Colors can be equally as distracting. As you can see here, many of these fonts don't work. So generally, use blacks, blues, greens, and reds. And a quick note on formatting, PowerPoint itself has a good default format, and it's good enough to use, and I probably wouldn't change that. Now for the structure of your slides, you should be aiming to present 1 to 2 minutes per slide. We suggest writing in point form for clarity and not in complete sentences. Generally, 4 to 5 points per slide is recommended. Try to avoid wordiness and use only your key phrases. This is what we mean by a wordy slide. It's distracting, and we can't expect the audience to read all of this while listening to what we have to say. It's boring and also can be very repetitive. So this slide looks okay, but if we focus on just the nouns in these sentences, we get a slide that is much more clear and to the point, and the readers can now focus on listening to you instead of reading your PowerPoint. The second benefit of a slide like this is that your audience will know what you are going to talk about, and that is essential if you want to keep them engaged. Now, a small note on transitions. Using them can be good for highlighting important information, but be careful because they can be very distracting and unorganized. Now let's look at some examples. In this slide, the student is talking about production processes, and they've put in their keywords and points and a lot of data. Now, what audience will do is they'll read this. So a good idea is, again, to take out the data and just keep focusing on the key points, like this. Here we've taken out the data, and the key points are clearly recognizable. This will help your audience stay engaged to what you are saying. Now let's move on to the use of pictures in your presentation. First off, pictures in the UK are not free to be taken from Google. You actually have to have permission to use the photos. And if you don't know who the photo belongs to, then you need to use a photo company that allow non-businesses use or royalty-free photos. For example, Pixabay is a great resource. Just remember, it is copyright infringement to take anything from the internet that you do not have permission to use. So now you have your pictures and you want to use them, but let's think carefully. Although this looks cute, is this relevant to what you're presenting? Or is it distracting from the point you're trying to make? It's also a good idea to avoid baby pictures in any business-like professional presentation. We would also avoid using cartoons and jokes because they may be funny to you but seriously offensive to somebody else. Pictures are really good to use, however, when trying to establish an idea. This picture of the world represents globalization, and it fits in directly with your key talking points. When done correctly, these images add to the presentation. Now we're going to talk about one of the most important parts of any academic PowerPoint: graphs. Choosing your graph is very difficult, and you need to make sure that they are not overly complicated or difficult for an audience to understand. In addition, a graph like this would be very difficult to interpret from a far distance away. When you do present a graph, chart, or table, follow a procedure. First, it's important that you talk about the graph. You should explain the axes, you should explain the title, you should explain the sources if they're relevant. Even good graphs can be complicated, so ensure clarity by describing it appropriately. Sometimes you may need to rebuild graphs and tables to simplify them, and that's what's happened here. I've rebuilt this graph in a way that's easy to distinguish the differences between the different months. In addition to having a clear correlation of the differences, you should also provide a good oral analysis to complement the graph. Infographics are also good to use. These are very clear and much more entertaining than your traditional charts. These can be very clear and represent your data in a visually appealing way for your audiences. Tables are also a really good idea if they are simple and they are easy to explain. Remember, the font in tables can get very small very quickly, so be careful. If you need to put a complicated table in your PowerPoint, please highlight the information that is most important. Without these highlights on Mars, the audience would be scanning this chart way too long and you would have lost their focus. Next up, we're going to talk about overcrowding slides. This is something that students often do. When there's a lot of data, information, or text on the slides, it can be distracting. And this distraction can take away from your main point. This example doesn't visually look very nice, and people in the back of the room won't be able to read that chart. You see here, all of the information is still present on this slide, but it's more organized and easier to read. Now let's talk a little bit about referencing. It is vital that you reference all of your material to give credibility to your claims. One way to do this is to reference after a stated fact, or to put the references at the bottom of the slide in a small font. Both written and verbal references to source material is extremely important. Then your completed reference list will come at the end of your presentation and should follow particular referencing, such as APA style. And now a final note on spelling and grammar. Please proofread your slides for things like spelling mistakes and repeat words, grammatical errors that you might have made, and other things that might have slipped through the cracks. It's even a good idea to have somebody else check your presentation before you go up on stage. Even your friends may catch errors that you didn't. So in summary, think about your design and think about your fonts. Reduce your ideas down to key points and really focus on presenting those key points clearly. Use graphs and tables for visuals. Keep 1 to 2 slides per minute and add animations for engagement, and don't forget about your referencing. Thank you again for your attention, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation on how to make good PowerPoint slides. There will never be one right answer for this, but these are great places to start.